Okay, let me know when you're ready, guys.
Yeah, I think we're good on this end. Is
Yeah,
everyone
we're
good to
good.
go? Matt, Jordy?
Yeah, I'm good. Let's do it.
Yep.
Okay, let's rock it then. Hi guys, my name's Bit Shaman and I'm representative of the Gem Hunters. I'd like to Sentivate team, Tom Marchi, uh, Matt Karajovic, and Geordie Manyoma. It's great to have you back at the Gem Hunters for round two of the Sentivate Q&A. I know you've been very busy as of late, but we really appreciate the time you have set aside for us and our members here at the Gem Hunters. I know I can speak for a lot of us having the opportunity to speak to a CEO like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk before their product hit it big. That's how many of us feel about the direction of Sentivate and where it's heading. We really feel like this product will be an integral part of the internet computing in the very near future. I'm going to start off with asking Tom a question just to give people what Sentivate is all about. Can you tell us, the community, what Sentivate exactly is and what you're trying to achieve, please?
Yeah, so a great way to kind of look at it, I think most people can kind of comprehend this because it's a more layman's view of it, is right now it's effectively an alt web, so an alternative, web, an alternative experience, built on totally different technology that's kind of been reimagined, and obviously introducing some new tech. So the word we like to use is UW, or the Universal Web, and this gives people kind of an idea compared to the World Wide Web. So for us, we're taking on a much bigger goal, a much bigger idea, and looking at where the web is going to be or where it's heading, as opposed to where it is now. Uh, we're introducing a new protocol which replaces HTTP, UDSP. We're introducing a different type of DNS system, which we call the DIS, Domain Information System. We have new stuff coming in to the web that changes kind of how you interact with it, how you use it, and the features that kind of are available out of the box for it, like the identity registrar. This is stuff that will get rid of kind of passwords and usernames, and people will more of have like profiles for the web, and in a way that's why we call it the identity registrar or identity certificates. You have these, cryptographic certificates, which obviously have your key pairs in it, and those are actual fiat key pairs, as well as they are kind of the basis for establishing an encrypted connection from server to client, or another destination if you're doing P2P type of stuff. But that's a specific protocol that we have for that as well. We have different P2P CDN solutions we're also working on that will kind of bring on the hybrid nature of it. Obviously, Viat ties into UDSP with its proof of work inside UDSP packets as packet puzzles. So yeah, there's two different networks being built for Sentivate. There's the Universal Web, and then there's Viat. So when people say the Sentivate network, what they're really saying is both the Universal Web Network and the Viat network. Our main focus now is the Universal Web and getting that all together and that all sorted. That's the centralized bits of it for the most part. There are decentralized components that will enhance the centralized ones, but our core focus is purely the technology side of that centralized portion. So people can immediately start hopping on, writing apps, providing services, so on and so forth, taking advantage of the tech. For example, if Binance wanted faster trading, or maybe you wanted faster trading at home when you're doing some day trading, a great way to kind of take advantage of what we have is to use that to send your messages to that end service. Obviously, that end service would have to adopt something like UDSP to fully take advantage of it. But yeah, I think that's a good intro. And yeah.
Thanks, Tom. For anyone who wants to hear the last Q&A that we did, we'll have a link soon, and there's also a more in-depth intro there which Tom gives. So we'll link that to you. We finished this Q&A. I've got a couple of questions for Matt now, if that's okay. How do you view the current market for Bitcoin?
If I had to give one word, it would be bullish. If I had to expand on it, it would have to do with the fact that we have the halving approaching and only 321. We've actually recently cleared the accumulation zone for Bitcoin from around 3,200 bucks to 4,800 with very good momentum, might I add. So we should be heading into the next parabolic cycle from there very nicely. There's also more and more institutional kind of eyes that are getting into the space, getting more engaged, or even just wanting to get in, whether it be from actual, custodian services, and then also the fact that we have also numerous emerging market kind of issues coming over the horizon here from still a spillover from the '08 crisis. So I would say that all things considered, the market is looking extremely good, discounting any unforeseen future systemic risk.
I have to agree with you there. Would like to ask you the same question, but regarding to alts this time.
So in regard to the alt market, I would say that we've seen very good, really, allowing it to mature out of 27. The fact that for the most part, pretty much every major alt is positively correlated to Bitcoin. It should come to follow that we see a repeat of a lot of gains coming from Bitcoin appreciating in value, flowing back into the alts. It's kind of funny enough that the bulk of the crypto community strategy revolves around maximizing the amount of Bitcoin they can acquire. And one of the best ways to do this efficiently is by leveraging the alt market after BTC appreciates into devalued altcoins.
Yeah, I think we're all anxious for and for the alt rally to come that we've all been waiting for. Um, Now, can I move on to ask you about the recent changes to the main wallet, please, Matt?
Sure.
What are the recent changes you've made to the main wallet, please, Matt?
So there were some concerns the community had for us. To us, all that matters is addressing any and all concerns the community has in the best possible manner. So there was some discrepancy about the kind of division and the allocation towards the team and advisor share for the leftover from airdrops that weren't fully disseminated during a lull in the bear market. And the community was in favor of remedying this with splitting up the allocations from the main wallet for the team and advisors from the rest. It's a simple enough solution for something that we take very seriously, though. So happy that that worked out well.
Yeah, I think it's been good because the team has been quite transparent with the community, and obviously we all know how much of a genius Tom is, and he's really out there, and people can see his knowledge, and you it's backing him up. So I'd like to move back to Tom, and I'd ask you a question. Sentivate calls itself the future of the web. Can you tell us what you see wrong with the current state of the web and what must change, please, Tom?
Sure. So the web kind of has a plethora of issues. Some of it is technical and some of it is philosophical. The technical concerns are mainly related to the protocol, and we've seen stuff, and that's specifically HTTP and TLS, obviously being the encryption layer. So that in and of itself, we've had companies like Google work on stuff for years now to solve this problem, and they've been using it internally themselves, which is a custom UDP protocol called Quick. But there's only specific use cases for that. When they're introducing Quick, it's about replacing the functionality that HTTP already has. Um, it's not about where's the web heading type of situation, uh, and changing the way the protocol functions itself and adding all these additional features. It's more of just, okay, we need to transfer data a little bit faster, but the semantics are kind of all the same. That's why we have something like HTTP3 that recently got announced, and we've been advocating for a custom UDP protocol for a while and dropping TCP from the stack in favor of a more custom reliability algorithm and kind of all the cool stuff that comes along with, and the freedom mainly that comes along with a custom UDP based protocol. There's a lot of flexibility there. You can update stuff, you can change stuff really quickly, really easily, and kind of have like rolling updates coming out. So what Google's been doing was using this Quick protocol in all Google Chrome based browsers, and then Google services. And they've seen a percent increase. I think it was maybe in the low, I know it was sub 10%. I think maybe it was around 3%. I'm not sure exactly, of improvement. And obviously that means, money saved, but also for the client, a better experience. or potentially less bandwidth being used if they're on a bandwidth-based plan, which is a big concern, obviously, for anyone running on a plan that if you spend over a certain amount of GB per month, you have to pay obviously out of pocket for that overspend. But yeah, so the protocol is an issue in and of itself. And there's a few different concerns there. It's not just about, okay, we need to replace the functionality that HTTP has, just be more efficient at it. I think, and this is what our perspective is, and this is what we're proposing, is we're seeing where the web's heading, and we're designing a protocol that fits those, that view. So for example, our protocol would be something kind of like, for any of the web devs out there, if you looked at WebSockets and you looked at HTTP and then you looked at Quick and kind of merged them all together, like for something for like a single page web application, a protocol that kind of solves all of those issues. And that's exactly how UDSP is set up. It's a bidirectional real-time connection that's supposed to be there for the lifetime of the application, the life cycle of the application. It's not meant to be immediately closed, but it can be. So it's very flexible. If you're just transmitting some assets and you want to close it immediately after, you could do that. But it's specifically designed to be a bidirectional real-time connection between client and server. So yeah, that's the one thing we're addressing, and we're designing these things to kind of meet the future needs, or kind of the bleeding edge needs of today, rather than, okay, let's just make the protocol better in the way that it functions already. So there's that thing. Then there's also the way DNS is. So I usually like to point out Minimalt as a great example of kind of a good attempt at, hey, addressing these issues and being like, here's some potential solutions to this problem. I think it's a great paper. I think they were kind of onto something, but the way they carried it out, obviously we don't agree with, but that obviously wasn't their intention. So for us, DNS, obviously we have movements like DNSSEC, but not all DNS is encrypted. There's certain issues with it, from a performance standpoint, from a security-based standpoint. There's certain problems, but these are technical issues. For us, our main concern was, from a technical perspective, how can we take zero RTT and make it kind of the default for the network, period? How can we take the act of having cryptographic certificates, instead of having it, you go to the server and you get it from the server, instead you would get it from the DNS, and you would get back, say, geolocation-based server info, but in a cryptographic certificate format. So you would get the routing information in addition to the key pairs, cryptographic key pairs, with a certificate. So it's a signed certificate. You can validate this, the full nine, and then you can connect using a zero RTT connection to the service. Now, in certain situations, if you're connecting to a test network or something of that sort, you can still take advantage of having to connect to that service and then requesting their certificate. So that's still possible. Obviously, you wouldn't have zero RTT in that respect. You'd have a much different setup, but the flexibility is there. By default, nonetheless, it's all about zero RTT and getting everything in an encrypted format from one source, which is the GIS. And we're designing it kind of like how Cloudflare approaches it, where you have a very near instant time to live. You can make changes relatively quickly. It's a nice interface. It's not complicated, and it kind of spreads out through the network in a fairly quick fashion. So there's that, and the other things that we're kind of looking at from a philosophical perspective is kind of like how ICANN comes into play here. Their view on how domains are regulated, and how stuff like trademark law gets involved, and you can get your domain basically back if you have a trademark on it. Things like that nature is we're also addressing, but the way we've addressed it is it's different rules and regulations for domains. So you have to be categorized. The domain has to fit a category. If it is a news site, it has to be on a news domain. That's roughly speaking, of course. There's always exceptions and whatnot. If you're running a store, obviously, like, Newegg, for example, it's going to be on a .store extension. Um, you can't, this way, if you're distributing something like malware, for example, and, its intention is to spread malware or spyware or something of this sort, you can get your domain disabled, right? Obviously, it's designed so that you can protect the web in and of itself from potentially, bad actors. And this is in addition to identity certificates. It allows you to kind of disable certain issues that might come up. But that's the more philosophical end. That's where the human element comes in. It's not code based. It's meant to be flexible for a reason. It's nothing that's hard coded into it, and that would be making decisions for people and all that stuff. It's more of like you report this domain, or we find it, and there's an investigation, and obviously if it's more complicated, like trademark law and whatnot, we'd let the courts handle it before obviously making a decision. We let people arbitrate that and deal with that. But yeah, I think that about summarizes it.
Thanks, Tom. I'm just carrying on from that question. When will a web browser public consumption? What will we see in the browser that will change the way we see other browsers, for example? Cheers.
Yeah, so the browser is going to be it's a Chrome-based browser. It's forked from Electron. Electron is obviously its dependency. It's similar to kind of have how other browsers or other applications have used Electron in the past. So, we get rolling updates with it. If a new version of it comes out, it's a new version of Node. It's a new version of Chrome. It's a very similar experience. Obviously, the GUI is all on our end. We're making the GUI, the backend, like that. All that stuff is obviously on our end. But for the most part, like the web-based technologies that will be coming out, we'll be able to advance with the web that's we have today and the browsers that we have today. So if a new feature comes out in JavaScript, we'll also be able to have it. So the developer experience to the user experience will be, for the most part, seamless. It'll look very similar to an average day browser. We'll have a Viat integration at some point when Viat launches. You'll be able to, in addition to your profiles, effectively, they're also Viat wallets. So it'll be a very similar setup to Firefox, to Chrome, but obviously more specifically Chrome. You'll be able to browse the World Wide Web as well as the Universal Web. And you can do it at the same time. You can swap between the two. For the World Wide Web, though, you have to put in HTTPS as the protocol to view www sites. It has to be encrypted by default. We won't allow non-encrypted connections to operate on the browser. For us, you don't have to type in the protocol UW or anything like that. You can if you want to. You can also type in UDSP as the protocol if you wanted to from a developer standpoint or even from a user standpoint, and it would obviously prioritize a universal web setup. For us, though, another thing that's coming into the browser, and you're going to see a very strike difference in the way applications show up on the universal web compared to the World Wide Web. For us, it's kind of like how Apple and Android kind of approach their application development. There's kind of like a default scheme or theme to applications, and they function a very specific way. We have the same setup. What we're using is, and we'll see this with the next GitHub push, is a bunch of materialized based components. So materialized, for those who don't know, is it's a design framework mainly pushed by Google. A bunch of kind of sites and applications have picked it up, and it's kind of like the leading design framework for today. Materialize is the one that we use specifically. If anyone were to go on Google and type in Materialize framework, you would see the ones we'll be using. That we've recently, one of the devs have been integrating Reactive based components. That's Reactive, not React. Reactive is a front end component-based, reactive component-based library written in JavaScript. I think it was originally developed under the Guardian, or from the Guardian, one of the devs there. A brilliant guy. It's a great framework. It's one that we chose over React. We chose it over Angular. We chose it over Vue. It's got a lot of that flexibility that we like, a lot of that kind of dynamic nature to it, but it's still robust enough to where it gets the job done. So the way people are going to look at default sites and the way developers are going to develop on, say, HApps or on the universal web is a little bit different than the World Wide Web, but it's more finely tuned. So it'll be easier to create applications. It'll be easier to develop. It'll actually even be easier to use it, and they'll look better by default. You're going to have, all these different types of buttons that you can immediately do, and these different, nav bars, all with functionality already out of the box. So you aren't typing, and rebuilding components like nav bars and all this stuff from scratch for every application. You can immediately do it. You can immediately learn it. There's immediate documentation for it, and start rolling out applications relatively quickly. But yeah, it's going to be a very similar experience overall. For developers, we're actually focused on making, as well as users, but this is going to impact developers more. The development process for applications on the universal web will be substantially easier, especially for devs who are not designers by default, or who don't really play around with GUI design or don't really know about it. It'll be substantially easier. So if it's just let's say a kid in maybe high school or grammar school is creating a little web page or web app, it's actually going to look and function substantially better than what they would be able to develop and push. Even in this, if it's just a to-do list, it'll be much more complicated to do a to-do list on the World Wide Web than it would be on the Universal Web. The Universal Web, it'll be fairly quick, and it'll be more JavaScript based, and you're going to be writing HTML that's more of like reactive markup than regular HTML, regular syntactical stuff that doesn't really have any functionality. But yeah, we'll have the same benefits that the World Wide Web has, if without the downsides the Universal Web will have. But the way apps function will be, from developer standpoint, there'll be real-time based applications. You're going to have a real-time bidirectional stream up for the lifecycle of the application. So you're writing features in an app around that idea, but you can kill the connection if you see fit, if you think it's more efficient for the server for your specific application for it to end the connection and free up resources. You can do that from the server side or from the client side. So it's up to you to kind of decide as a developer, or if you're a company and you find that to be a better option for you for your specific use case, then you're free to do that. And we allow that for a bunch of things. From the DIS perspective, you can decide if you want geolocation to happen from the DIS, or if you want it to happen from your load balancer or your setup or your system or your network, or your application, whatever you want to do, you have that freedom to do it. We don't want to force anyone into certain behaviors or actions that may limit the application's performance or capabilities. But yeah, for the most part, people will have a very seamless experience. It'll feel like everything else. It'll just have a lot of additional functionality and features that you won't find on the web today. Or the web today simply isn't capable of, because again, like a lot of these features can be a feature because we're rewriting a lot of the base core technologies that the web relies on today. For example, the protocol. On the web today, if you wanted that real-time aspect to it, in addition to transferring assets, you're talking about obviously an HTTP connection, HTTPS, and then a WebSocket connection, right? A secure, so WSS. And for us, you don't have to do both. You would just do one in our case, which is UDSP, and then you have the freedom to change the reliability per request, and change kind of when you want the connection to die, or if you want to ping pong to keep the connection open, or if you want to do puzzles to keep the connection open. If the client has to solve a certain puzzle, which would yield fiat via proof of work in the packet. There's a lot of flexibility there, but for the most part, users won't even know that's going on. They're just going to get a really seamless experience where they have, a web that already looks good by default, that functions better than the web we have today, that's easier to use, that just looks better all around. But yeah, the experience overall will be exactly what you get today, plus a whole lot more in terms of features.
Thanks for answering. That was a very extensive answer, Tom. I think a lot of us get lost in the technicality of some of your answers, but it's good to know that you've got. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll go to a break for the public to ask questions. How would the average user integrate Sentivate into their browsing experience? Is it aimed at the average user?
Yeah, so initially our first and primary concern is actually bringing on developers. So we want to, and developers and companies. So we wanted to make it, there has to be certain advantages to developers and companies to want to use this technology for, you to have actual adoption. Users wanting it is really a second priority. If developers don't take it and build stuff with it, there's nothing for users to use. So from that perspective, and that's why we place a huge interest on and focus on the development experience just in general and the benefits that companies can get from using this type of technology. Because if you don't have developers or companies who want to use the technology, you're not going to have anything for users to use. That usually always comes second. The features and advancements come with the technology, developers use it, and then users end up using it, and then it spreads from that way. But yeah, it's going to be a pretty streamlined experience, and it's a very similar experience, but it's not meant for you to install this to a Chrome browser. It's not meant to be installed to a Firefox, browser. It's not a plugin. There has been some talk about allowing that to happen at some point, but it'd be a very degraded experience at that. And there's certain restrictions that will most likely make it impossible or illogical or irrational to do. For us, you're going to download a browser. This browser is going to look very similar to Chrome. It's going to act very similar to Chrome, especially if you're a developer. And you'll have everything you pretty much can do on Chrome. You should be able to do on ours, on the Sentivate browser. Now there are some exceptions. If you're the Google integration, for example, we don't want that. Obviously, we don't want statistics being pumped to Google. We don't want any adware related stuff. There's plugins that may not be available. That is a Chrome-based plugin, let's say. We can allow it. It is possible, but it's not a focus of ours. We might play around with it to allow other, developers to write plugins. Obviously, that's a thing for us, but already existing Chrome-based plugins is a different topic and a different conversation. We'll definitely allow plugins to be created by developers so that the browser experience can be somewhat modified. Now, there's going to be a lot of security on that, for sure. Obviously, we don't want people to somehow get a plugin installed automatically like Chrome has had, I think, in the past, or other browsers have had in the past, where they installed this plugin and then some code was being loaded over that they didn't want, and it resulted in compromising, let's say, your passwords or something of this sort, which is definitely not unheard of, from even plugins for WordPress to plugins for Chrome, the plugins for Firefox, where they're taking credentials or phishing credentials effectively right from your browser, right from your end, and then sending the credentials someplace else. Obviously, we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that we put in protections against everything like that. But yeah, the browser experience is you install the browser and then you use it. There's going to be certain exceptions to that rule when we look at mobile, for example. We want to have integration into the Apple Watch at some point. That's one of the devices we recently got, and we're kind of exploring to see how we can more effectively integrate it into stuff like the Apple Watch or like IoT devices, Raspberry Pi, things of that nature. But the mobile world is going to have kind of a hybrid-esque approach, mainly just because that's the way the setup is for mobile. You have these frames instead of Electron on it and whatnot. But yeah, it'll be a fairly seamless experience, fairly easy experience with the idea that it's going to be you install the browser. You're not using a Chrome browser to do this. You're using a separate browser.
Just to butt in, sorry. Also, Tom mentioned the RFIDs that we will be testing as well.
Right. Yeah. So this is kind of a bit disconnected to it, but one of the things we also picked up was RFIDs for access control systems and for signing into systems with a card, let's say, from afar. And we're kind of gearing this, though, obviously, for kind of, like big tech guys who just kind of want to explore that area, but also for companies who have access control systems, or, let's say they want to remove credentials from a building for a certain person in real time at any location. There's certain solutions that we're building out for that, where it integrates the RFID, let's say your card, with identity certificates. There's some additional protections on top of it that we're allowing, like an encrypted storing of it, so that when the system reads it, you have to type in, a certain code to unlock it, or let's say Face ID, or a thumbprint, things of that nature to further secure the information on the card itself. So if someone scoops the card from afar and reads it, your credentials aren't immediately lost. There's additional protections on top of the data to ensure that if someone does scoop it, it's fairly useless and it's just encrypted and they can't really do anything with it.
Okay, thanks, Tom. We're going to take a short break now, guys, to take any questions people might have for the team. People can refer the questions to the Gem Hunters Telegram group, where we will then relay them to Tom. So we'll take a short 10-minute break now. Cheers. All right, welcome back, guys, to the Sentivate Q&A. I asked Matt earlier his predictions on Bitcoin and altcoins, and we're already back over 12K, so this interview's obviously having a good effect. Tom, I've got some more questions for you here. Are there any new advisors or team members coming on board the project?
So we have a new advisor that we were recently talking to, John Brown. There's another 3 advisors after him, but we're not ready to announce their names yet. Now, they'll be involved in various aspects of the project, but we'll provide that info to the community and to everyone in the description, and as well as on our site when we officially disclose that information. But these are all people who have very detailed profiles, detailed histories, detailed connections, and that they don't require too much explanation. I think it's very straightforward in their roles.
Okay, cheers, Tom. What interviews are coming up also, Tom?
So there's the Chico one, and there's also proof of review and a few other review-based kind of analysis, and they kind of do due diligence on us and go through and make sure the team is valid, the project, the code, stuff like that is all being validated independently. Proof of review is coming up, as well as the Chico one. The Chico one, I'm going to try to be there in person in Miami. We have some big stuff coming up in July for the company, so that may have me tied up a little bit. But I'm going to try to get to Chico as soon as possible, and if not, we can just do a webcam-based one, obviously, if the community wanted it sooner rather than later. But yeah, I mean, that's coming up, and that's honestly one of my main concerns. I'd like to have one where Lou and Ali comes out to sit down with us and have a more in-depth conversation about stuff, maybe out of crypto as well. Obviously, is in relation to the project, and have more of a podcast style feel to it, and move from there.
Yeah, I think we've all observed how much motivation and how much you care about the project and how much effort you're all putting in, and it obviously means a lot to us investors. Another question would be, this is another public question, by the way, guys. Be ready to test?
So the browser is actually already ready to test. If you wanted to play with it, you could go right on GitHub and you could download it and then compile it real quick, and run it on Windows, on Mac, and on Linux. Obviously, you just need to be able to follow the README and the directions on the GitHub. But yeah, I think July will be a bigger testing period because we have a lot of code coming out with the next commit. That includes, the identity registrar, the domain information system, the different servers, different examples, different simulations that we're allowing people to run, a lot of updates to the way UDSP works. But yeah, I mean, July is going to be, I think, a bigger time to test it and a more exciting time to test it. Obviously, on all platforms, as Electron automatically is supported on Windows, Mac, and Linux out of the box. So, portability isn't going to be a concern.
There's another question here, which is quite good in my opinion. Are you worried about copycats, like people stealing the idea of Sentivate and using it for themselves?
So one of the concerns our advisors actually had was related to patent work and stuff like that. A while ago, we actually started patent work on Sentivate, but it was called something else at the time, and it was built a little bit different. We're repicking up that patent work. One of our advisors, Andre, he's a Polish guy, a really cool guy. We just, he's one of the newer ones coming on board. We had our first phone call with him a week or two ago, and he put a lot of pressure on the patent related work, and that will obviously protect us from a patent standpoint. But obviously this is open source, so we want people to take advantage of it. For the most part, it'll be a plug and play thing, so it would be more advantageous for people just to simply use the system than attempt to modify it, take it, and run with it. But yeah, I mean, we don't really see anybody even in this space remotely looking at the stuff we're looking at. They're not actually building, a data transport protocol. We had a developer from another project come in, and his response was, "I'm going to attempt to poke holes," but he didn't know basic information like what XCHA-20 was, how key exchange algorithms work, basic cryptography or basic network related questions. And if going off that, it doesn't really, point to the devs in this space going after what we're after. A lot of people make this assumption that we're a blockchain-based project, which we aren't a blockchain-based project. Blockchain's involved for sure. We aren't a decentralized-based project either. We're building technology that makes sense for the solutions, for the problems that we're facing. We'll never try to decentralize everything or try to blockchain everything. There's specific use cases for specific problems. So people aren't messing with that. Developers aren't messing with that. And based on the interactions we've had with other developers, they're too focused on philosophical inquiries than technical problems. There are issues, for example, with ICANN, or with DNS is related to ICANN, which is not related to the actual technical problems that DNS has. Those are more philosophical questions.
Thanks for answering that so extensively, Tom. I've got I think we've finished now with the public questions. We'll go back. I've just got a small announcement to make. If you've got any exclusive information that you'd like to share with the Gem Hunters and any other communities that is so fresh that it hasn't been revealed anywhere else, Tom?
Ooh, I don't know if we want to put that out yet. I know it's exchange-related news. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't think we should go into that just yet. But we could release it to Gem Hunters earlier if we have that conversation. But yeah, it's exchange-related news. There's two exchanges that we're looking at that are kind of validated exchanges that we're focusing on. Rather than just what CMC's info is. It's more of like we want to avoid stuff like wash trading, market makers, stuff like that. So we want the next two exchanges to be as organic as possible. And those are the next two exchanges that we're focusing on. I can say that they're well known and that most people know about them. But yeah, other than that, I'm not going to dive too much into it.
No, it's completely fine, Tom. I know I put you on the spot a little bit there. I didn't mean to. I was just digging for more information. I want to thank you for joining us. We've got great respect for you and the whole Sentivate team. We've been behind you since the project came to light, and we're certain that Sentivate will be one of the top projects to watch out for now and in the future. And anyone who's watched this and is looking for a community family to be part of, please check out the Gem Hunters. You'll find links in the descriptions. Thanks for your time, guys. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. It's great as always. I look forward to the next one.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, man. Take it easy.